I, too, am America. So reads the final line of a classic Langston Hughes poem. Those words, I, too, am America, also are inscribed in capital letters across the large interior wall at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, a truly magnificent public institution designed by the architect, Sir David Adjaye, whom we're very blessed to hear from this afternoon. Speaking at the museum's grand opening in September of 2016, this country's first African American president, Barack Obama, repeated those powerful words, as many had before and many have since. I, too, am America affirms that the African American experience is a part of the American story. In just a few words, Hughes' famous line centers the African American lived experience against the context of an American history steeped in racial discrimination, and he articulates a vision of racial justice. The line reminds us that America belongs to we the people, and that in every generation, we the people, all of us, redefine the American experience. The premise that the arts, literary, visual, and performance not only reflect but shape the American experience is what animates this two-day convening on vision and justice before us. And it's the power of art that demands that we collectively contemplate whose words, whose experiences are shared and amplified in the art around us, and what that means for our democracy. As Dean of the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study here at Harvard, I am truly honored to host this event. I'm grateful to Professor Sarah Lewis for conceiving it, to the Ford Foundation for helping to fund it, to my colleagues across the university who are participating in this event and who helped to bring it to fruition, and of course to our co-sponsors, the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, the Harvard Art Museums, and the American Repertory Theater. There are many others to thank, including our array of speakers and performers. I want to say thanks to all of you. We have a packed afternoon ahead of us, so I want to close by simply saying, welcome. I'm thrilled to have all of you here and to embark on what will be and what is a crucial conversation. Now, with that, I want to turn things over to Sarah Lewis. Sarah guest edited, eager, yes, we're eager for you. Sarah guest edited the 2016 Vision and Justice issue of Aperture magazine, the seed that blossomed into this wonderful convening. Sarah serves as assistant professor in the Department of History of Art and Architecture and African American Studies here at Harvard. Let's all give Sarah a warm welcome.
Badly that I didn't invite my parents. Oh, goodness. Thank you to Dean Tomiko Brown-Nagin for that warm welcome. Thank you to everyone who's traveled for so far to be here today. It's my great pleasure to be able to also welcome you to the Vision and Justice convening here at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. I could not begin my remarks without thanking the leadership here at Radcliffe for the extraordinary amount of work that has gone into this convening, and to those who have worked alongside me in my department and across campus. I want to begin, though, by thanking someone else. This is a man who was going to school in 1926 in Brooklyn, New York. He was interested in history, and he wanted to understand it more. He was in the 11th grade, and he asked a question that should have been simple enough of his history teacher. He wanted to know why the world didn't look like the world in his history textbooks. He wanted to know where African Americans were, where Asian Americans were, where Latinos were, where the whole world was. And the answer he received from that history teacher was that African Americans in particular had done nothing to merit inclusion. And he refused to accept that as an answer. So he was expelled for his impertinence, as it was called at the time that year in 1926. And that man was my grandfather. He never went back to high school. He never received a college degree, but he became an extraordinary artist, a painter and a jazz musician. And he passed when I was a student studying the history of art and encouraged me to ask a question that animates my research and has led to convening like this. What is the role of art for justice? He had created images that positioned him as a kind of proto-Kehinde Wiley, inserting into the genre paintings the world as he hoped to find it in those history textbooks. His name was Shadrach Emanuel Leigh, and my name is far less cool than his, Sarah Elizabeth Lewis, but my initials are meant to honor him, and I'd like to think that it's a testament to what can happen in America, that 2 generations later, I'm here teaching the very material that he was expelled for asking about in 1926. What is the role of art and culture for justice? How have we enlarged our notion of who counts in society? Citizenship was defined in 1790 as being white and being male and being able to hold property through the Naturalization Act. What has allowed for that definition to enlarge to the current day? Is the journey solely a legal narrative, or is it also a cultural one? I think you know my answer. How do we frame this cultural journey episodically? I structure my teaching around this question, and I focus very much on my teaching as I consider this convening, because this event, in my mind, is dedicated to the future. It's dedicated to the students who will continue this work. And it's because of that fact that I asked for a student to create a trailer, a documentary, a short film, to give us a sense of what this convening is all about. I wanted to see it through his lens, through his eyes. This is an extraordinary senior on campus. His name is Lance Oppenheim. And he has created a short 7-minute film that I'd like to show you now.
One of the things that's so unique about this particular medium is that it's been both used to honor human life and to deliberately denigrate it. Photography was weaponized through the history of racial science to prove polygenesis. What is lost if you don't understand the history of African American photography is the incredible amount of work that has been done to create counter-narratives that offer, I think, productive, corrective moves with an honor and dignity that we're still striving to put on various magazine pages, newspaper pages. You see this parallel path of insistent humanity, insistent dignity. I think American citizenship has long been about this merger of pictures and progress.
You all wrote extraordinary response papers. Many of you focused on the way in which the camera ultimately is used not just by someone like Gordon Parks, but in general as a weapon to create new narratives, right?
I'm based here at Harvard. I'm a professor here, and I could not be more grateful to do the work that I do. Part of the work of culture is to get us to see past our blind spots. Increasingly today, we are reading the world through pictures. We all have a level of visual literacy that is informing how we make meaning of what's around us. Why should art and culture matter for justice? What does it say about our norms and our laws that we need to count on culture to perform a kind of work to get us to see each other anew. This is really the question behind the question that drove Frederick Douglass to consider this during the Civil War, that brings us to Harvard University to have a convening to think through these ideas.
The journey to honor the dignity and humanity and the fullness of human life cannot be waged without pictures. This is something I've come to understand, and this is what Frederick Douglass knew.
Every time Douglass saw an image of himself taken by a photographer, it was the anti-statement to the ocean of negative images that have been fabricated to justify the slave trade. He understood that the subjectivity of the person of African descent was dependent upon the creation of a self. Douglass was a master of visual literacy.
This is the most photographed American man in the 19th century. Not African-American man, photographed American man. What did he know about himself? What did he know about our need for multiple images of a representative figure like Douglass? He writes at the end of his speech that it might take over 150 years, quite humbly, he said, for someone to come along and better explain what he meant. And I'd like to believe, and I know, that it's a scholar like Deborah Willis who he had in mind.
The only way you could have true visual literacy in the African American tradition is if scholars assemble the works that have been created by Black visual artists and make them available to us. Deborah Willis is peerless in terms of plumbing the archive and preserving what you might call African American ways of seeing.
What I believe that Sarah Lewis tried to do is to inform the contemporary world a new way of thinking about looking at images. How do we connect the 19th century to 21st century artists?
Our perceptions have changed as a result of the work of artists and culture. An image that creates an epigraph for that idea, to my mind, is the virally disseminated image taken by White House photographer Pete Souza of this young boy, Jacob Philadelphia. He wants to know, is my hair texture really the same as yours? This young boy needs evidence that he too can be the commander-in-chief, that he too can be the president. American citizenship has long been a project of vision and justice. It launched a project, a laboratory of initiatives, a civic curriculum, a convening.
I think the convening is the 3D living embodiment of all that's implied in the premises of vision and justice. It's bringing the special issue to life.
Building community and sharing community and family is justice.
People from different fields, but people who are all committed to the goal of seeing justice, seeing love in public. This is life-changing, this is life-giving work. Having the visual and the verbal vocabulary to be able to read the world around me and understand why I see what I see, and to have the tools to tell my own story, I think is really important.
What's the persuasive efficacy of a picture today? Do they harden your beliefs or stereotypes about other groups? Or can they persuade you to see the world differently? I do hold out the belief that the kind of productive stillness that we've seen in response to the aperture issue, the way in which it does stop people in their tracks, is a way forward, and lets me retain my belief in the work of photography. Pictures work, and they let us get to work.
This is an extension of the work of W.E.B. Du Bois at Harvard. He took his knowledge through his engagement with the African American community to reshape the way we saw ourselves, but also the way we saw our responsibility to do important works. I think vision and justice is very much in that legacy.
When I saw Vision and Justice, immediately I thought, another monument in the history of great anthologies. Precisely because images have been used to oppress us for so long. We have to know that history and then know the history, the geniuses among us who have implicitly fought back against those negative images and explicitly insisted on representing Black ways of seeing the world. That's why I think this convening is a brilliant idea.
The work of this conference came from a huge collaborative effort, and I want to thank a few more individuals before I invite a colleague to come to the stage. There's an outstanding advisory committee that worked on this alongside graduate students and undergraduate students, comprised of Henry Louis Gates Jr., Lori Gross, Evelyn Higginbotham, Elizabeth Hinton, Robin Kelsey, Carrie Lambert Beatty, Yuki Olipet, Jennifer Roberts, and Tommy Shelby, and Damien Wotzel. The early shape of this event came from pivotal conversations with leadership at organizations that have also supported this, Michelle Coffey and Darren Walker and Elizabeth Alexander. An early conversation with President Emerita Drew Faust regarding the cultural citizenship work that happened when she was dean here at Radcliffe inspired the shape of many of the panels that you'll see today. And it's born really out of longstanding work that's happened at Harvard, but this event I see is also in lineage with work that has been done by the, indeed, as Henry Louis Gates Jr. said about Deborah Willis, peerless scholars like her. The organization of Black portraitures has inspired this, the work that has come serially through those endeavors, the work that has happened through the initiatives at the Cooper Gallery. This is but one of many different convenings, but what I hope can occur here is that we can reconsider the need for a space like this. I could feel the excitement when we walked in as we were anticipating what was to come. And I think back to Frederick Douglass speaking here in Boston in 1861 and again in 1865 about the space within ourselves that he hoped would be ignited by what he called the thought picture of the world that could change because of the force of images. So I very much hope that's what's inspired in us as we hear what's to come. We will have an extraordinary performance by a photographer who I also believe is who Douglass had in mind in Carrie Mae Weems. We will have an extraordinary exhibition of the work of Gordon Parks, who is certainly also in this lineage at the Cooper Gallery, to deliberately coincide with this convening. This is also meant to be, as you know, an intergenerational event, and with that end, we've distributed for free a civic curriculum published by Aperture, and I thank them, Michael Famighetti and Brandon Emsber and Elsa Hardy, for the work that went into this. And now, in the spirit of considering the next generation, I wanted to bring to the stage virtually, because she's studying abroad, a student who's created a poem inspired by Frederick Douglass. Her name is Amanda Gorman, and I'll read you a bit of her bio. In 1917, she made history by being named the first ever U.S. National Youth Poet Laureate. Her poetry has won her invitations to the Obama White House and commissions to perform for Secretary Hillary Clinton, met Al Gore, and many more. She's spoken across the country and is currently a junior at Harvard. She writes for the New York Times and many other outlets. She is a native of LA, and Amanda Gorman tells me that she is going to run for president in 2036. And I certainly hope she does. After watching this video, you'll have a sense of why.
I remember I am a house full of glimmering glass, the chaos left from the battle and a battalion of gazes. It is a maze of shells, pieces of black, unexploded and unexplored. I remember my ancestors bare-backed, bent-backed, who built houses full of windows, had wombs full of glass, but never had mirrors of their own, never had a home to know themselves in their own image. How must it have been when the Civil War tore from Gettysburg into a transfigured war and daguerreotypes, tintypes, ambrotypes, electrotypes, in carte de visite in the photograph? My, oh my, did Douglas kill over and laugh? What must it have been like to go from being an image of property to being the image of progress, to demand to be more than a picture but nothing less than a person? They knew this battle well. Ida B. Wells, Harriet Tubman, and Harriet Jacobs, W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T, and Sojourner Truth. They all knew the truth. The photos could be the wound and the weapon, but also the hope and the healing. How, too, they must have played host to the cloud of glass and light inside themselves, crying for freedom, loud as cannons at Sumter. Frederick Douglass said, "The servant girl can now see a likeness of herself, when once the luxury of likeness was the exclusive privilege of the rich and great." And the luxury of likeness is still a luxury and a load we are learning, but we will not wait for a vision to be ridden by the violence of victors. Our bodies no longer be the glove of every gaze except our own, because today we are the masters of our own portraiture. Well, pictures mean people, mean progress, mean process, mean protest, mean the project of vision-making, the project of democracy-making, for people to be rendered visible, indivisible, vivid, and vibrant as all the glass we carry. We cannot just have a vision of justice. We must be able to envision ourselves in that vision for justice to be served, for the right to representation that we all deserve. I remember we're all houses of masses of glass from battalions past, managing to hold ourselves together. And oh, how glorious are our windows, how new are our mirrors, scrubbed and kissed, so we might be able to know ourselves in the reflection, so we might roar back to the vision there.
Extraordinary talent in Amanda Gorman, and now you know why she's last in my remarks. It's hard to follow her. She's extraordinary, and this is what happens when creative talent meets study. It's an example of what happens here in the arts and humanities at Harvard, and with that, I would like to invite, and it's a true honor to have Robin Kelsey, our Dean of the Arts and Humanities here at Harvard, and also the Shirley Carter Burden Professor of Photography in my home department, History of Art and Architecture. His irreplaceable insight and inspiration and fellowship shaped this convening in countless ways. Thank you so much for your support and the inspiration that your scholarship offers. So with that, we will continue the work of saluting the next generation with your remarks. Thank you.
I was just trying to get over Amanda Gorman, and after those words by Sarah Lewis, I'm a mess. It is a tremendous honor to be here, and not just an honor, but an experience that is mind-bending to feel the electricity in this room, and to feel, as one of the students said in the video, the life-giving work that's being done here. For those of you who have come from far away, I think you can see why being a Harvard professor is one of the best, if not the best job on the planet. This gathering is both a culmination and a catalyst for so many dreams that Sarah Lewis has called us to pursue, and it does feel like a dream to be in this company. At Harvard, we seek to bring the arts and humanities into the center of civic life, to bring them to the hardest questions, including questions of justice. And Sarah and Tomiko and others here are leading the way. As a historian of photography and a fervent admirer of the work of the great Gordon Parks, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to oversee the awarding of the first annual Gordon Parks Foundation Essay Prize. Each year, this prize, which comes with a $5,000 grant, recognizes 3 Harvard students for essays that explore the relationship between visual arts and justice as it pertains to racial equity. Before handing out the prizes, I want to welcome to the podium Peter Kunhardt Jr., the executive director of the Gordon Parks Foundation, to say a few words. Peter.
Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Kunhardt, the Executive Director of the Gordon Parks Foundation, and it's an honor to be here today for the conferral of the Gordon Parks Foundation Essay Prize. I'd like to start by thanking Professor Sarah Lewis, Harvard's Office of Arts, the Department of History of Art and Architecture, and the Department of African and African American Studies for collaborating with us on this. And I'm very proud to congratulate our 3 Gordon Parks inaugural Essay Prize recipients. Gordon Parks and my grandfather, Phil Kunhardt, co-founded the Gordon Parks Foundation in 2006. They were colleagues and best friends from Life magazine. As managing editor at Life, my grandfather asked Gordon to go to Atlanta to cover Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral. The assignment was as a writer, not a photographer. For Gordon was not only a photographer, he was an artist with words, music, and in later years, filmmaking. His contributions to the civil rights movement, his empathy for the poor, and his lifelong battle against racism define his legacy. Just the way today's convening explores the relationship between visual art and justice, that is exactly what the Gordon Parks Foundation is all about. Through our prizes, scholarships, fellowships, publications, exhibitions, we work to help the next generation find their creative voice through their own distinct role in advancing social change while continuing to champion Parks's inner voice and historical importance. I am pleased to announce that the newest Gordon Parks Foundation exhibition, organized in collaboration with the Ethelbert Cooper Gallery of African American Art at the Hutchins Center, opens tomorrow. The exhibition, entitled Gordon Parks: Selections from the Dean Collection, features the largest collection of Parks's photographs in private hands. I'd like to thank the deans, Kasseem and Alicia, for allowing their extraordinary collection to be on view here at Harvard. I'd also like to thank Skip Gates, who's known me since I was about this big, and who has wanted a show at the Cooper for a long time, and my great gratitude to Dr. Maurice Berger, who served as consulting curator. I hope you'll all have a chance to visit the exhibition. At the heart of the Foundation's mission are Gordon's own words. He described his search for a common search for a better life and a better world. His camera was his weapon of choice to fight racism and poverty, for he knew that art could be a powerful weapon, more potent than violence, and that through pictures, his words could open our eyes. His line, quote, "Our common search for a better life and a better world," was the last sentence of a paragraph I'd like to read to you now. It was from his 1967 cover story for Life, entitled "The Negroes and the Cities, the Cries That Will Be Heard." Gordan was not only the photographer on that assignment, but he was the writer as well. Both his images and his words came from his heart. He wrote, "What I want, what I am, what you force me to be, is what you are. For I am you, staring back from a mirror of poverty and despair, of revolt and freedom. Look at me and know that to destroy me is to destroy yourself. You are weary of the long, hot summers. I'm tired of the long, hungered winters. We are not so far apart as it may seem. There is something about us that goes deeper than blood or black and white. It is our common search for a better life and a better world." Thank you very much. Now let's turn the spotlight over to the jurors for the Gordon Parks Foundation Essay Prize recipients. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And now for the prizes. The jury, overseen by Professor Lewis, consisted of Alicia Amstead, Teju Cole, Carrie Lambert-Beatty, Jack Megan, Karthik Pandian, Brandon Terry, and myself. And this year, by prior stipulation, the prize was to be given out to 2 undergraduates and 1 graduate student. The 73 submissions included many extraordinary essays, making selection extremely difficult. We picked 3 winners, as was our obligation, but a 4th essay was so compelling that the jury decided to recognize the author with a special citation. Giovanna Jones, could you come up? So you have to stand here while I embarrass you. That's the price you pay for honor. Giovanna is a 3rd-year graduate student in African and African American studies. Her essay, Social Photography and the Racial Politics of Place, analyzes Arthur Siegel's World War II era photographs about African American families moving into federal housing. Her essay deftly inserts this work into a longer history of photography of African American domiciles and everyday life, including photographs by the great Gordon Parks. Giovanna concludes the essay by pondering our opportunities to use photographic archives with all their exclusions and limits to narrate history differently, very much in the spirit of vision and justice. Please join me in celebrating once again Giovanna Jones for her achievement. The first of our 3 Gordon Parks Foundation Essay Prize winners is Juliana Leigh. Juliana, could you come up? Juliana is a junior at Harvard, concentrating in history and literature with a secondary field in ethnicity, migration, and rights. Her essay, The Varied Self-Assertions of Indigeneity and Gender Identity in Bindi Cole's Sister Girls, addresses a powerful body of work by the Indigenous Australian artist Bindi Cole Chokha. As Juliana explains in her essay, Sister Girls is a series of photographic portraits exploring the intersection of indigeneity and transgender identity on Australia's Tiwi Islands. By attending with extraordinary care to historical circumstances and visual rhetoric, she trenchantly reveals how the project gave the subjects of the photographs a chance to resist a long history of violent intolerance, a chance to assert and articulate, in her words, their gendered, spatial, and racial belonging. Please give it up for Jelani. To present the second Gordon Parks Foundation Essay Prize, please welcome to the podium my dear friend and colleague, the Elizabeth and John Moores Cabot Director of the Harvard Art Museum, Martha Tedeschi.
Good afternoon. I am so delighted to participate in awarding the inaugural Gordon Parks Foundation Essay Prize at Harvard. And of course, I'm also thrilled to have this opportunity to welcome you all to Cambridge, those of you who came from across the river or across the country. Welcome, and to welcome you also to this landmark conference on behalf of my colleagues at the Harvard Art Museums. It's my distinct pleasure this afternoon to salute one of our award winners, Patricia Liu. Although a serious ankle injury prevents Patricia from being with us in person today, I'm pleased to offer you some reflections on her important work. Patricia is a Harvard College sophomore, concentrating in English with a secondary field in mind, brain, and behavior. She researched and wrote her powerful prize-winning essay entitled Postcards from the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921 as part of Professor Sarah Lewis's Vision and Justice class in December of last year. In her essay, Patricia takes as her subject the mass-produced commemorative postcards, similar to the better-known genre of photographic lynching postcards that were printed and distributed following the horrendous race riot and massacre that occurred in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the late hours of May 31st and the early morning of June 1st, 1921. At the end of this violent night, approximately 300 Black citizens had been killed, and the thriving Black neighborhood of Greenwood had been terrorized and nearly destroyed. As Patricia's research reveals, the events and statistics of this atrocious chapter in Tulsa history were underreported in the newspapers of the time and have been largely neglected or downplayed in textbooks and later histories. Until very recently, that is, when the accounts of Black eyewitnesses and visual evidence, such as the grim postcards documenting the aftermath of the massacre, are now helping to piece together the story of entrenched racial prejudice and violence for which nobody, especially the police who were the primary perpetrators, was ever held accountable. Patricia's work on the Tulsa Race Massacre postcard serves to remind us of the crucial importance of mining our archives, libraries, and museums for those images that can help us to unlock difficult and misrepresented episodes of our history. This is work we must all do collectively, harnessing our own areas of expertise and conviction to the larger project. At the most basic level, it means working diligently to make these objects from our past widely accessible so that the scholarship and responses they can inspire can be truly multivocal. And personally, as the director of a university art museum, and I think there are a few other directors of campus museums here as well, an essay such as Patricia's makes me want to work even more tirelessly to put students and emerging scholars in contact with potent objects and images, encouraging them, and all of us together, to turn these objects around in our minds and in our hearts, unlocking the potential of alternative narratives and fresh thinking, and yes, taking inspiration for a more just future from our most challenging as well as our most celebrated histories. So Patricia, if you're listening electronically this afternoon, congratulations and thank you for your fine and thought-provoking work.
Before we get to our third and final prize winner, Sebastian Jackson, the author of a terrific essay on the art of Adrian Piper that analyzes racial fears and fantasies of domination, I want to take a moment to echo Peter's words and thank Kasseem Dean, aka Swizz Beatz, and Alicia Keys for very generously loaning their Gordon Parks collection to the Cooper Gallery for the exhibition that whose opening is coinciding with this gathering. I think it'd be really nice to acknowledge the incredible munificence of this loan. So when I told my daughters this morning that I was going to be introducing Swizz Beatz, they said, "No way, Dad." But it's true. But it's true. The man himself, Grammy Award-winning artist and producer extraordinaire, is here to present the third Gordon Parks Foundation Essay Prize. Please welcome to the podium Kasseem Dean.
Blessings, blessings, blessings. This is an honor to be here. And you know, when I look back, I'm like, man, this started as a dream. And Peter know, with the red socks on, he got his red socks on today. I like the energy, I like the energy. Woo! But this started out as a dream, how many years ago now, Peter? About 7 years ago. And I've always been into photography. My grandfather was a photographer from my mom's side. And it was just something always about capturing the moments of time. And although I love all forms of art, photography is something that just, I don't know, it just prints something special in my heart. And I remember my wife getting me 2 surprises, and they were 2 Ali Gordon Parks works. And I was like, oh, I married the right one. Because she felt my passion and she understood the love that I had for photography, and she was kind of nudging me to go on and explore that even more. And to be here 7 years later, our collection being shown is just something that is just phenomenal. You know, I have the butterflies over it, because a lot of people talk about the culture but don't own nothing from the culture. And, you know, the Dean Collection, this is the message that we want to put out. You know, we have to embrace our own culture, and it's okay for other people to embrace it as well. But we should be the leaders of our culture. And so, you know, for this Gordon Parks show to be the first show ever 100% put on by an African-American collector marks a new day in history and time today, which we're honored to be those people. And we will not only collect, we will protect the legacy, which is the reason why it's at Cooper and the reason why we're doing the right things alongside with the Gordon Parks Foundation, because, you know, he was way ahead of his time. And it's a shame that although his photos are beautiful, a lot of the images still reflect today. Small changes. Everybody in this room have the power to make big changes. You know, this is a very diverse set, and it's not about religions, it's not about those different things, it's about good and bad. And I feel that the good is coming together to do great things and good things, and us as the Dean Collection, we have a responsibility, and so therefore, Peter, we want to match the grants. The Dean Collection want to match the grants that's given out today on behalf, because it's our responsibility to help the future in honor of Gordon Park. So the Dean Collection would love to match the grants that's happening today. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much. And, and blessings to Harvard. This is my family here. I spent 3 years on these grounds, OPM 48 and 50. And the reason why I shout out Harvard is because education is important to all of the artists out there, all of the photographers. And just we have to always sharpen our pencil. And it's never too late to step up to the level that you're supposed to be at. And don't let anyone tell you that education is a thing of the past, or education is something that you don't need because you're successful. It's something that we need more of every day, because the world is changing every day. So let's give a round of applause for the importance of education. Sebastian Jackson. It's a major honor to have greats. Look, he comes. You see that? I like that. He said my name. I'm going to the stage now. He don't need no intro. Sebastian Jackson. Thank you. The one and only. Blessings.
I would just love to give one more round of applause for all of our winners of the inaugural Gordon Parks Foundation Essay Prize.
It's been an extraordinary start to the morning. Thank you so much to all who just presented the awards to our incredible students, and for the additional gift that we're able to give. Thank you. Thank you so much. Swizz, Beatz, Kasseem, Dean. The Dean Collection being on view is extraordinary here, and it's how do we own our culture, right? How do we own our culture? This is really the central question that animates the How Can Art Inspire Justice remit of the conference. How can we own our culture? We do this by collecting the work of extraordinary artists, by supporting their work, and also by shaping the narratives that are put out on newspaper pages and magazine pages. Being intentional about that, being mindful about the work, both harmful and corrective, that can come when we do that. This panel will speak to this powerfully, I know. It's a privilege to be able to introduce and to bring to the stage a colleague here, Makeda Best, who is a curator at the Harvard Art Museums. She's the Richard L. Menschel Curator of Photography here. Alexandra Bell, as well, the multidisciplinary artist who investigates the complexities of narrative, information consumption, and perception using various media to deconstruct the language and imagery that explore these tensions between marginal experiences and dominant histories. Jelani Cobb will join our panelist. He is at Columbia Journalism School. He joined the faculty in 2016. He's a contributor, of course, to The New Yorker, and is an extraordinary colleague here to all of us. Nicole Fleetwood as well will join the panel. She is a fantastic writer and curator and professor of American Studies at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. Her books include Marking Time, Art in the Era of Mass Incarceration, which is forthcoming. And she is also the co-editor of another Aperture guest issue, Prison Nation. So please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Hi, welcome. Yes. Thank you. Starting. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So, I think maybe we can start by considering this question, the role of art and culture for justice.
I'm still stuck on the poem.
Okay. I think we all are.
So when we had this conversation, we said that, as a historian, I would kind of start out framing some of this. Mm-hmm. And so what I think is crucial about this nexus of citizenship and racial narratives is to understand that there isn't as much of a dichotomy between those two things as we suspect. And the reason I say that is this. The project that I'm working on now is the book about Charleston and the 9 people who were killed in the basement of Emmanuel AME Church in 2015. And as a result of that, people are very familiar with the very dramatic turn of events that involved the removal of the Confederate flag. This is what the then Governor Nikki Haley said would happen as a consequence of this. And the flag comes down. Of course, Bree Newsom had removed it on her own before, and I preferred her method of removing the flag. But it comes down officially. And it isn't until a few days later when I'm there, I'm still in town, and I'm talking to a local historian who pointed out something that I would not have noticed, and indeed most people there would not have noticed, which is the statue of George Washington that sits in front of the State House in South Carolina, in Columbia. And it's not uncommon for there to be a statue of George Washington in front of a State House. And he asked me if I knew what this meant, and I was like, it's statue of George Washington. And he said, no, do you understand that the statue of George Washington was there in tandem with the Confederate flag? And then as a historian, the gears kicked in and remembered that the people who seceded from the Union, the people who sought to destroy the Union in 1861, did so in the full pursuit of their belief that they, not the federal government, not Abraham Lincoln, they, those 11 states, were the true heirs to the spirit of 1776. Which is to say that their conception of citizenship was one that did not include black people. And they made this argument with some justification. They looked at the 1790 Immigration Act that said that the only individuals who would be allowed to immigrate into the country and become citizens would be white men. That when we look at 1857 and the Dred Scott decision, we fix upon that phrase which says that no Negro has any rights that a white man is bound to respect. But what we don't recognize is that Chief Justice Taney is writing in his estimation of the founders. He's not giving his own opinion. He's saying, as far as I understand the framers of this Constitution, they never intended for the Negro to be part of this compact of democracy. And so when we look at what happens in the establishment of the 14th Amendment, and we look at what happens consequently in the struggles that go from the 1860s to the 1960s to realize this century-long series of promises and that culminates in the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act and the things that are under siege now in 2019, what we have to recognize is that this is not a matter of citizenship and racial narratives. It is a matter of our concept of citizenship being a racial narrative. And so I think that is what's so crucial about the work that we're talking about here. These interventions, which are literally saying the 400th anniversary of our time here in this country, and in the colonies that preceded it, that this is who we are. We have been witness to everything that has happened here. We have been an engine to how all of this has evolved, and that we have been this insistent presence saying that for those who said that all men are created equal, all human rights are endowed by our Creator, that we indeed are human. And this has been the testament that I think is so crucial to the visual aspect of what we're here to discuss.
Right. Thank you.
Maybe we can, I think that one of the things you're talking about is racial discourse in the public sphere, and I think that that's something that's really important to, Alex, your work. Maybe we can look at it now.
Yeah. I think everything's about race. Black communities, gay communities, immigrant communities feel a lot of media representations to be inadequate, biased. There's There's a lot of reporting around police violence and Black men. And I realized a lot of the arguments that we were having were about depictions. I started to wonder, how different would it be if I swapped images or if I changed some of the text? And so that was the first time I physically started playing around with the works. This isn't a grammar exercise. I'm really trying to see if I can disrupt subliminal messaging about who should be valued. I needed kind of one of the most respected institutions that kind of prides itself on getting this right to kind of say, actually, nope, you're not getting it right? The counter-narrative series, the primary way you see it is in public, in the streets. We went to 4 locations between Bedside and Crown Heights area and hung them up. You imagine who might be moving in at like the height of gentrification in many of these neighborhoods. And you're putting this print up of this like dead Black kid. The title is 2 Lives at the Crossroads, equating these 2 lives as if they're neighbors. The Times layout to me perpetuated that. The subtlety there is that this isn't equal. These people are on equal footing. They have equal responsibility in this event that took place, and that's not true. I don't believe that. You have a cop and you have a kid, and there's a responsibility here, and it lies with one person more than the other. I know he was 18. I feel like if he wasn't Black, we would be calling him a kid. So there's a lot of what in journalism is key information. He'd sometimes use drugs and he'd rapped, and I just don't think that that's necessary information. So I blacked it out. Like, oh, that's what you do when you're 18. You do drugs, and you drink, and you rap, and you curse. Because, like, really? Did you just write in here that you curse? It just goes to show how important images are. It changed the way I viewed the text. Now you know he's a kid, right? During the Olympics and the Ryan Lochte scandal, you have this headline about these swimmers, and then there's this big photo of Usain Bolt. And I remember just being like, what the hell? There's no way if the track team had done that, they wouldn't have been on the front page. People felt like I caught the Times making a mistake. And maybe willfully using the image of a Black man under crime. I found a very good image of Ryan Lochte that was just him alone in the pool. I redacted most of the article, but I also inserted white Americans into the title to categorize it in a way that other races were categorized. I guess there's something restorative about it, kind of restorative justice. You know, online, the hashtag was like white crime, white photo. And that was really funny because people were like, yeah, that's actually a really good hashtag.
When you are done with the sand, move back. Will not replace. When you are
I'm 35, I've never seen a torch rally. Like, this is some shit I feel like I would read about in a book. It was a riot by white nationalists, and I was like, they're gonna get it wrong. And they got it so wrong. It was a side piece. It had 2 columns out of the 5 on the front page that day. If you have a white torch rally, this is a major event. This isn't a sidebar item. For the most part, I keep the layouts how they are. But the problem here was the layout, right? That's the journalistic hiccup here, is that this layout doesn't speak to the severity of these issues. what you give space to and what you allow people to see says a lot. The Tulsa hate crime is a really interesting one because I didn't really make an image swap. Vernon Majors was this white guy. He lives next to this Lebanese family, and he had harassed them for years. And eventually, and unfortunately, he kills the son, Khalil Jabara. It runs with this wonky headline that says he's a Tulsa man and accused of harassing this Lebanese family, charged with murder. That's interesting. The Lebanese family had been there for 30-something odd years. I say since '83. And this guy had been there like 7 years. So I'm trying to figure out why he would get that title. If anybody was to get it, it's Jabara who should get that title. And I removed Lebanese. And I also inserted white American. I was really interested in the way the news can slightly other people. And I used the word racism as well. Because he called the family dirty Arabs, but then it just says harassing. And I'm like, I don't understand why we can't just say racism. Like, they just didn't want to use the word racism. The news cycle moves so quickly that we're all kind of skimming through things and we're just kind of accepting narratives. It's not always this bombastic and in your face. There are these subtle ways that racism works in the oldest of institutions. If it's not this egregious thing coming at you, I think it's so easy to ingest. You might not print Mexicans or rapists. What other ways do you contribute to the thinking about minorities? You have to be able to look in the mirror and go, we're failing in these ways. And if you don't see yourself as maybe just as much of a problem in some ways as Trump, then what work are you doing? What's important about counter-narratives is that it's not meant to be like an indictment of news media. I could almost say that it's just as much as an indictment of the reader. Now, I don't know what impact that will have with the papers, but I definitely know people are saying to me, when I'm reading now, I'm saying to myself, why is this photo here? There's something about seeing a different image, about shifting the size of a photo. It gets at a feeling that people have, but they don't know how to explain it. Where I'm situated as a person in the margins, I think I can see where there are gaps in ways that other people may not. I'm a Black gay woman. That goes very much into kind of how I see the news, how I interpret what happens. What I believe might be an angle that's overlooked doesn't necessarily mean I'm more right. It just means I have a different vantage point. So there are a few more works in the series, and I'll quickly get to them here. I guess it's a little weird to sit and watch myself, but I'm a lot more long-winded than that video, and we're short on time. So the counter-narrative series is something that I maybe first thought of in this really odd way as a journalism student in 2013. Sitting in a classroom full of mostly white people trying to figure out why the news felt like it was giving me the facts, but it wasn't true. Like, it wasn't honest. Something felt amiss. And over time, particularly in 2016, when there are a number of police shootings and we're all just ingesting a variety of media, one of the things that really became clear to me is that media is kind of white supremacy's number one way of importing particular views and things that we have about ourselves and others. And so it started in many ways as a selfish project. I was trying to block out a lot of the kind of noise and the violence that comes through in these very subtle ways. And by the time, 3 years after grad school, I figured it out. This article layout always stuck with me. So I went back to it. And when I first started doing them, I was putting them out at 2 a.m. illegally in Brooklyn. This is somewhere in Bed-Stuy. And so I was kind of watching on social media anonymously as it kind of took off. I'm sharing this smaller here is because there was a pivotal moment where I realized how invested we are as a public in particular narratives as well. This band came through as a sign of gentrification and covered the work up with this sign, right? And someone peeled it off. Now, you know how hard it is to peel something that's sticky off of something else, right? So I have this visual of someone just kind of hovering over it, breathing, and then kind of slightly peeling back. And so I was like, that's kind of interesting, but the wall is pretty messy anyway, right? And so it's doomed to come down. And then it gets painted, but that gets left. So then I realized at that moment the importance, particularly of this image. Now, the journalist side of me was like, damn, the first panel's gone, they don't get it. But the other part of me realized that this was something redemptive for people. And so I'm just gonna quickly slide through the other ones. This is an install that I did at University of Kansas. The goal of the larger pieces of the work is for people to kind of gather around and to dialogue about some of these topics. And in many ways, I think they're really perfect for college campuses in those ways. This is also University of Kansas. This is just another quick run through of the works that you saw. This is a newer one. If you look at on the left-hand side, this is when Venus Williams was going to be one of the oldest women to reach the finals of Wimbledon. Prime tennis time. At the bottom, maybe right-hand side, there's her article. Her photo was in the interior in black and white. And so I just kind of reimagined it with her on the front. It's not annotated here because you guys have the rough cut, but this is the before and after is how you can think of counter-narratives. This is also a work in the series. Proud Boys founder Gavin McInnes. If you look at the one on the left, you get a sense of how attached the Times is to kind of celebrating white supremacy. He was a hipster and a far-right firebrand. And you see the image at the top. He is not the guy holding the mic. And I was like, if you're a firebrand, maybe you should be in charge. Maybe you should be holding the mic. So I reimagined it on the side as from vice media to gang leader. Really also think about coded language and how that language is applied to particular communities, but I've never heard of a white dude called a gang member. So, and he also said it was a gang, so there you go. And so that's the work that I do. I'm very interested in finding ways for myself and for other people to reimagine and think critically about visual and language and how that defines how we see the world. And I think primarily from a bottom-up perspective, if we can some kind of create a type of literacy or strengthen our skills to see things, that we can kind of combat them a bit more. And just to share a bit more here, these aren't about images. We're at the 30th anniversary of the Central Park 5 case. And this series, No Humans Involved After Sylvia Winter, looks at 12 days of reporting from the Daily News about the Central Park 5, from the first day's reporting to the infamous Trump ad, where I'm simply just really highlighting dehumanizing and animalistic language. And so this isn't, I've blacked out all of the images. I'm trying to get people to somehow see 5 black boys as a victim, and I felt like they couldn't if we were also looking at a white woman. So I had to kind of really force the eye. So this is, you see Wolfpack's Prey, you also see Savages. There are 20 pages that will be in the Whitney Biennial, and this is kind of me rushing mad dash to finish them. Wilding is probably the second day of reporting. That was the front page. Inside there was another panel that says teen gang rapes jogger, no alleged, no suspected. Wolves hunted as cops combed was one. And I don't think I can see that to read it to you. Okay, yeah. A cop looked in and was surprised to see the kids sleeping. A few of them jerked fitfully in sleep, guilt working hard on the body. The cop was glad to see this. Look, he recalled saying to a detective, humans. There's this moment where we picked the title already, but then we got to that page and we were like, yes, this is the perfect title. So that's my work, and I think you know, in kind of honor of the thinking about kind of vision and justice. Maybe I'll borrow from Richard Pryor a little bit. I was thinking about just us and trying to create a set of tools for myself and other colored folk kind of to protect ourselves against a lot of this messaging. And I think this kind of segues into Nicole's work.
Thank you.
Sorry.
It's such a great pleasure and joy to be here and to talk to you about the work I've been doing for the past 7+ years on art, visual culture, and mass incarceration. And it ties in very nicely with the setup by Jelani and the work that Alex is doing in terms of thinking about how we see and who we see. And my work has focused largely on our loved ones who are rendered invisible, who have been removed, the many millions of people who've been removed from the streets, from our homes, from our communities. And our only way of accessing them is visiting them in prison visiting rooms. And so it started for me when, actually when I turned to a shoebox, and it's a shoebox where I had collected many images of posing with my incarcerated cousins, people I had grown up with. While I was going to college, they were 16, 17, 18, going to prison 10, 20, 30 years, one incarcerated for life, sentenced to life. And I had to come to terms with these images, and I started doing that by just sharing. Whenever people would invite me to lecture, I would just bring these images and start talking about them and talk about growing up in Southwest Ohio in a very hyper-incarcerated community and what it means to pose in prison with incarcerated relatives and to try to maintain family across our prison nation. And from doing that, basically my community has grown. I was invited by Aperture, Michael Famighetti and Brendan to co-edit a special issue of Aperture magazine on the impact of photography on documenting mass incarceration. And we were able to think about the work of many amazing Black photographers and non-Black photographers who are doing work around exposing the cultural impact of mass incarceration, like the work of Dina Lawson, the work of Sable Elise Smith. I'm going to move through some of these briefly, and also Keith Calhoun and Chandra McCormick, who are a married couple who've been documenting the impact of incarceration on the state of Louisiana and Black Louisianans since the early 80s. Many of their neighbors are in the lower 9th Ward, have been incarcerated at Angola, and they see their relative, they see part of the documenting work of Angola as maintaining relations with family members who are being held in punitive captivity and their neighbors, and also thinking about the long legacy of racialized captivity and racialized violence and subjugation. And I wanted to set up by showing you some of these images to think about how non-incarcerated people, social agents, people who are committed to social justice, document incarceration and mass incarceration. The focus of my work largely has been on the work of incarcerated people to document their experience. So the book that is coming out with Harvard University Press in a few months is called Marking Time: Art in the Era of Incarceration and Mass Incarceration. And it features about 6 dozen currently and formerly incarcerated artists who talk about what it means to use their punitive captivity, to use the time to experience time as punishment. We are sitting in this room, and it's such a joy and a delight to be here, and thank you, Sarah Lewis, for putting this together. We don't know what it means to have our time measured as punishment. And so I think about how incarcerated people are documenting this, and one of the ways of doing that is thinking about the spaces where they're making art. This is a self-portrait by a formerly incarcerated artist, Ronnie Goodman, who's painting himself into a long legacy of self-portraits by artists. But there are certain symbols that show that he is held in punitive captivity. The blues of his uniform, he's in San Quentin. The prison guard's window up above where he can be watched, but he can't see them. These are other drawings by incarcerated people. This is an artist named Cornell Honeycutt, held in Supermax. And so he's documenting the place where he's held 23 hours a day, sends it out to the Solitary Watch program, and they make it available on their website. In terms of thinking about time, many incarcerated people actually make art that's reflecting punitive time. And this is a really amazing painter by Raymond Taylor, who was wrongfully convicted, held in prison for 27 years. And during that time, he said he studied the so-called great masters. And so he got really into Salvador Dali, and this is his passing time painting. Then Eddie Cates. Eddie Cates is in prison now in New Jersey. He's in his 60s. His family have been trying to get him out. They suspect wrongful conviction. 27 years into his prison, and his sentence, he starts to take a drawing class. And this is one of his very first drawings based on an archival photograph. Many incarcerated people all they have are pencils and paper. And so there's a lot of graphite drawing. Here's his interpretation of the killing of Philando Castile called Deja Vu. Again, he's 62, 63, first-time artist. And then Kenneth Reams, who's also currently incarcerated. He's in a Supermax prison. He's on death row. And he's thinking about what's available to incarcerated people, the kind of junk, the kind of poison, but also the continued impoverishment of the families of incarcerated people. So you put money on the books so your incarcerated loved ones can buy junk, and how it fuels the type of system. I'm just going to go through some of the images, and I'm happy for us to just talk more about it. James Hoff is another incarcerated artist who's reflecting very much thinking about punitive captivity. He's a juvenile lifer. He was sentenced to life without parole at the age of 17. A sentence that, thanks to Brian Stevenson and his arguing before the Supreme Court, is now considered unconstitutional. But many people like James Hoff are still held in prison. He hasn't been released. He's become a mentor to other incarcerated artists, teaching them how to make art since over his 30 plus years in prison. One of my favorites, Tomiko Cole. She was brutalized by prison guards and could not do anything about her being brutalized except for making art. And she said in making this portrait of herself, she created her own dark calm. She, like many incarcerated artists, also are thinking about racialized violence on the streets and how the prison extends beyond buildings. This is her work connected to the Black Lives Matter movement, but thinking about the racialized killing. It's called Black Lives Splattered. One of the things that I focus on is how incarcerated artists gather material, how they create color with limited access to materials. So Jared Owens, for example, wanted to become an abstract painter. He said the only way he could manage penal time was to turn it into an abstraction. So he spent 18 years in prison, federal prison, for nonviolent drug offenses, became this really accomplished painter. This is his triptych, where he takes the iconic brick slave ship that Dr. Cheryl Finley has written about so eloquently and maps over it the prison where he's incarcerated. He lines up the holding cells, and then the dark spots you see is dirt that he took from the prison yard and incorporated into his painting. An incredible formerly incarcerated artist, Mary Baxter, has created this video triptych talking about giving birth in prison, where she was shackled for 43 hours. The title, Ain't I a Woman?, connecting again to the long history of Black captivity and also Black feminist activism. And then I want to end on portraiture. So probably the most common genre of art making in prison is portraiture. And I love being able to put their portraits in conversation with the amazing work of like Kehinde Wiley, his mugshot series, which inspired many of his future portraits, or Titus Kaphar, whose wonderful project, the Jerome Project, grew out of his search for his incarcerated father in prison databases and realizing that there were numerous men who shared the name of his father. People inside prison are also doing this kind of portraiture portraiture work where they're thinking about the relationship between Black subjectivity, Black individuality, and the history of criminal indexes and how portraits have been used by prisons to mark people. So here's Ronnie Goodman's self-portrait with boots. He's very inspired by Van Gogh. It's a lithograph. George Anthony Morton, who's become a really accomplished portrait artist who started in prison. This is his work, Mars. Brian Harrington, currently incarcerated. He was sentenced to 27 years at age 14. There's a clemency petition going around. Please sign it. He's right now at Dixon in Illinois, and we're hoping to get him out. Again, James Hoff. James Hoff was very inspired by Shepard Fairey, the Hope poster of Obama. And so here is his self-portrait, portrait of Yaya. I was lost, art broke all my chains. And then I want to end with one of my favorite artists and friends, Russell Craig, who at age 5 entered the foster care system and was tethered to foster care in prisons until he's in his early 30s. And he uses his criminal index, he uses his prison ID card to turn it into this great work of art, where he says, I found art in the Department of Corrections. He was also making portraits of his other incarcerated relatives while he's in prison. So while he's in state prison, his sister is in federal prison, and here's a portrait of her. Since being released, he's gone on to think about the criminalization of Black people, and here's his piece, Locks, when the Supreme Court rules that it's fine to discriminate against people wearing dreadlocks. And then I want to end with one of his most well-known pieces. This is an 8-foot portrait, self-portrait that he's done on his own prison records. So once he got out of prison, he collected all of his records to create this great work of art, self-portrait. Thank you.
Do you need this? So Nicole, I thought maybe we could come back to some of your ideas and something that you've written about and discussed, the idea that this type of work, looking at the work of prisoners, looking at other types of icons that you've explored in your scholarship, thinking about racial discourse as a social force. Maybe you could explore that idea a little bit for us.
So thank you, and I want to just jump off to continue with what Swizz said about collecting. So one of the things that I learned through working on this project, and I'm going to get to this question, is that we can also shift how we think about collecting. Guess who collects prison art? Incarcerated people. To think about incarcerated people as collectors of art. It changes some of the kind of the hierarchies that we create around who has access to art, who owns art, and what art is of value. So, and I think that does connect with the issues of icon and iconic, right? So I was interested in thinking about what does it mean to have an aesthetic vision? We're talking about justice and vision from a site of punitive captivity, where you have very little political rights and almost no social value. What does it mean to have a vision when you're in a 6-foot by 9-foot cell? When maybe you're spending 22 years in solitary confinement. And so these are some of the issues that I explore, and I can only explore by being in conversation with people who have been written out of many art histories, and those are people who are in prison. And I think in terms of us rethinking about what does the icon mean in this current moment, it's for us to really be more capacious in terms of thinking about who we're in conversation with and who's contributing to culture.
Alex, you're really putting your own work out there as that's a form of an icon and encouraging a kind of conversation in the public sphere.
Yeah, I mean, it's a appropriation, it's a counter-narrative, it's, in terms of the last series, it's literally kind of a highlight. I think one of the things I learned, I sometimes teach the work when I'm invited to talk to young students, and they're always really hesitant. So they're like, but it's already been written, and it's been published, and it's been circulated. And that solidifies something for them, right? And I didn't understand that until I said, okay, mark it up. And they all pause, and then they're like, but it's already done. It is what it is. And I'm like, it's kind of not, though. Have you ever read this article? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, write on it and tell me what you think. And then everybody's like feverishly, I think that visual arts particularly visual arts that combats things that we see, opens a door for us to challenge what was written, what was kind of already put down as fact, you know. I think a lot of us naturally maybe rail against institutions, particularly like the New York Times, but inherently I think we also believe them, right? And so it's just a reminder as we kind of go through the day. Like I got my New York Times today and I was like, ooh, is this a personal touch? But then there is kind of this, the work of visual arts is to kind of introduce alternatives, to introduce new ways of thinking. So yeah.
Makeda, can I join in just because part of what Alex's work does is also challenge the public. I mean, she puts the work in the public, and I think giving access to like people going to the subway to that kind of work is so powerful. That's part of.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, Jelani, to bring you in the conversation, it seems like your own work is also about challenging the public to think differently about institutions and representation. Even though you're not dealing with visual arts, you're still talking about issues of representation and challenging the public conception of who is represented in civic institutions, who is teaching what, who is representing what kind of information.
Yeah, and there's a one-to-one connection to that, which is that I recently guest edited an issue of the Columbia Journalism Review, and Alexandra's work on Michael Brown is on the cover of it. And that issue was specifically around who is not in newsrooms and what conversations are not had in newsrooms, and the way that, you know, the dynamics that lead to these conversations being had in such a way that they think that this is an appropriate way of discussing something that is really a matter of someone's life. And it confounds the convenient ideas about this. So one of the kind of most notorious statements about Michael Brown was the article that began with, "He was not an angel," but a black journalist wrote that line.
Yep.
And I wound up in a heated exchange with an editor at the New York Times after they ran the Nazi Next Door piece. And they didn't really understand why that was wrong. Dean Baquet is the editor-in-chief.
Yeah.
And so these conversations become complicated in these ways because sometimes simply diversifying the institution doesn't change the way the institution functions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so when we saw Alexandra's work, we were like, that's exactly what we're trying to get at here. And the things that I'm talking about, anytime that you see something that I've written, especially on subjects like this, that is the one that made the cut out of like the 10 or 12 other things that week that could have been on the list.
Yeah.
And so it's that same sort of dynamic.
Yeah, can I jump in on that? It's funny that you should mention that because I had just actually left the Times I went to speak to a kind of a small group of editors, and we walked through the works, and there were a room full of black and brown folk, you know. I don't make the diversity argument when people ask me if we can fix things. I'm usually like, burn it down. There is this kind of assumption that we'll put kind of, my work deals with frameworks. I'm not interested in the authors really. There are several hands that go into that kind of output, right? There's a headline editor and a photo editor and a layout manager and so many different people that combined still produce the same damaging content, right? And so there's always this assumption if you get a black person to cover a story, you won't get "He was no angel." You'll get something else. I don't know, right?
Can I add one quick thing to that? It's like, in some ways it's wrong, like the diversity argument is wrong on its face anyway. Because what it says is, we're going to behave in these racist ways, and then we'll hire people of color who have to stick their necks out and deal with all the flack, and then deal with the political consequences of this, and then they leave after 2 months, and we're going like, well, we tried.
Well, they were there anyway as kind of like, as part of a temporary kind of fellowship anyway, right? There's not a real position. Yeah, absolutely.
Fix. And so when, like, I have students at Columbia who ask me, and I was shocked the first time I got this, but now I've gotten this question, and no exaggeration, I've probably gotten this question 50 times from white students who ask me if it's okay for them to write stories about people of color and racism. And I was like, no, you absolutely have to. write these stories. You need to take my class, go through all of this kind of history of media representations and all these other kinds of things. But we really need for people to not simply be saying, stick the person of color in this position. And then on the other side, you have places where you have a room full of people who do something like the Ancestry.com commercial. And they think that that's cool.
I want to believe there was just like one black person in there was like, I'm just going to let them relax down. That was tired. They were like, you know what, not today. They're just
Like, no, I think that's good. You should go ahead.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that tying a lot of your work is, all three of you, is this interest in material culture and the public sphere, and actually thinking about how these objects had come to us either by a screen or other aspects, that these messages are important in shaping our racial understanding.
Yeah.
And I think it also ties in the work of a lot of black artists and cultural critics to take, racist, anti-black media materiality and to turn it into something else, to transcode it into other meaning. And I mean, this is clearly what Alex is doing with the counter-narrative series, and it happens also among incarcerated artists. They often take their own their sentencing papers. They take their disciplinary records, and they turn them they appropriate them and create art out of it. So I think this is a long history of working with anti-black material and mining that for other stories.
Yeah.
We're just about out of time. Thank you so much, Nicole, Jelani, and Alex. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just head off to the... Oops, sorry. That's right.
All right, so we are definitely here at this convening. Thank you so much, our extraordinary panelists. I wanted to be able to frame today's program with a panel that would remind us of the stakes of the work that we're discussing. And I think that we've had a sense of that from the past hour. To close this portion, and we'll have a brief break and then return, we wanted to bring to the stage two individuals who will offer tributes to those who were creating, alongside Alex Bell and many others, the counter-narratives that we need. These are two of my colleagues who are part of the first Vision and Justice issue of Aperture. And I should say that that invitation to guest edit that issue, which I was privileged to do, came from Robin Kelsey and LaToya Ruby Frazier, so thank you for that tip to Michael Famigetti and Brendan. And when I received the invitation, I knew immediately that these two colleagues that I'm about to introduce had to be part of it as well, and Robin is also part of this issue, which is just a privilege. The first is Khalil Muhammad, my colleague here at Harvard now. He's professor of history, race, and public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School and is the Suzanne Young Murray Professor here at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. He's the author of Condemnation of Blackness, Race, Crime, and the Making of Modern Urban America. The next will be Leigh Raiford, Associate Professor of African American Studies at Berkeley, and she's the author of Imprisoned in a Luminous Glare, Photography and the African American Freedom Struggle. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Good afternoon. And thank you so much, Sarah, for that warm introduction. I have to say something just as an echo of the last panel. It just won't take but a minute, but I can't resist. And that is that Alexandra Bell's work is incredible, as we've all borne witness, and the conversation around it. And the conversation around it equally stimulating in the work that Nicole is doing and Jelani is writing. But there's an echo here that I just thought is so powerful and so important to lift up. In a 1911 issue of The Crisis magazine, then edited by Du Bois, and only a few years, or in fact a few months in circulation at the time. This was shortly after the organization had been founded. Du Bois had set up a kind of racist police blotter, rather than the usual police blotter of a surveillance of what was happening in the crimes in the community. He was interested in all the racist terror that was going on around the country. And he stumbled upon an essay that an editorialist had written in Jersey City in 1911. And this editorialist was concerned about the problem of racist headlines, presumably a white editor in Jersey City. And so he revised all the headlines over the next 4 consecutive days. He ended up revising 50 crime headlines, and this is just a sample. 6 on stoop, shot by white man across street. Shoots detective 4 times and is shot twice himself, white. White burglar, son of banker, admits looting 18 homes. Ex-white policeman caught passing phony check, and white policeman accused of extortion. And adding to the saliency of these observations, it turns out that over those 4 days, he also noted that no black folks had committed any crimes, and ended sarcastically his editorial with this: "If it were not for the whites, the papers would not be worth reading." So, that's the echo. I have the great joy and pleasure of giving a tribute to Jamel Shabazz. Jamel Shabazz was born in Brooklyn, New York. At the age of 15, he picked up his first camera and started to document his peers at that time, inspired by photographers Leonard Freed, James Vanderzee, and, of course, Gordon Parks. He was marveled by their documentation of the black community. In 1980, as a photographer with a clear vision, he embarked on a mission to extensively document various aspects of life in New York City, from youth culture to a wide range of social conditions. Due to its spontaneity and uniqueness, the streets and subway system became the backdrop for many of his photographs. He has gone on to appear in shows all over the world, from the Brooklyn Museum to the Studio Museum to the Adidas Photo Festival in Ethiopia. His exhibitions include the titles Men of Honor, A Time Before Crack, Pieces of a Man, Represent, and have appeared again in countries as wide-ranging as the Netherlands, England, Italy, Germany. Jamel is also committed to giving back to the community by lifting up the work of young people, by helping to inspire them, and as such has contributed to the work of the Bronx Museum's Teen Council, Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation, so on and so forth. He's a frequent lecturer, but in many ways, like the traditions of the counter-narratives we have explored thus far, he contributes and continues to use the power of voice through the lens of his camera. And so I want to share for this great visual intellectual a tribute that was written in the Vision and Justice Aperture magazine, of which brings us here today. It is hard not to see the deep love of this photographer for his subjects, strangers mostly, but all part of a collective humanity, a universe of people who happen to walk the streets of Bed-Stuy and Brownsville, Brooklyn, the South Bronx, Hell's Kitchen, Jamaica, Queens, and all points in between. Affection is too trite a word to capture the meaning of the long stares, wide-eyed glances, and broad smiles of these proud people and their portrait artist. Before there was Kehinde Wiley, there was Jamel Shabazz, and his street portraiture of subjects framed by royalty of their own making. Black people, dignified, regal, shoulders back but with a slight lean to the side. The top-hatted brother dressed in formal attire, the trappings of a distinguished fraternity of men, evokes the long tradition of Marcus Garvey's ceremonial processions, of the officers and Black Star nurses of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, an organization of thousands of America's poorest standing side by side against the tyranny of their invisibility. From Garvey to the Nation of Islam to Shabazz himself, in these pages, we see Black America's royal lineage. And yet these are not timeless images. The backstory of these photographs and Shabazz's witnessing marks 4 decades of recurring economic depressions since the 1970s. These 21st century descendants of the Great Migration from the South and the Caribbean have been reluctant heirs of parents and grandparents, older siblings, aunts, and uncles. In search of what Richard Wright coined the warmth of other suns, and as told recently by Isabel Wilkerson, Black migrants changed America but could not pass along their inheritance to their sons and daughters. In spite of the devastating effects of joblessness, of educational malnutrition, of infrastructure divestment, what these young people in white gloves and hijabs lacked in material resources, they made up for with cultural and spiritual estates. They made up for with their associational life, their proud belonging to each other, communal, disciplined, active, hardly a people defined by deprivation and deficit. In Reagan's America, Shabazz's visual diary is the archival record of what the great jazz critic and novelist Albert Murray said was a community committed to the art of living, the art, that is to say, of enjoyment, without which there can be no such thing as human fulfillment. Dimensions matter, texture matters, layers and complexity matter. Shabazz's street photography may have the feel and tone of nostalgia. Even he has evoked the past as better than the present with such titles of his published works as Back in the Day or A Time Before Crack. And yet for an artist whose day job was a jail guard at Rikers Island and whose subjects were acquaintances on both sides of those iron cages, in his work is a vision of post-carceral America before most of us knew there was a new Jim Crow. Shabazz never framed his subjects by the worst thing they had ever done. Far from it. His photographs are worlds apart from the brick, the mortar, and the metal of confinement. His photographs are worlds apart, and in this way, that is precisely his point. He always looked these beautiful women in their eyes, these mothers, wives, and daughters of the incarcerated, carrying so much love in their pinned flowers, their pearl necklaces, petite fur coats. No one looked away because they saw each other as equals, as partners, as people. In the body of Shabazz's work is a fierce commitment to visibility. His is the artistry of making the unnamed, the unnewsworthy, and the undocumented appear before us. His lens has always seen more joy, more life, more blackness than our own eyes capable, even as we pass them by on the street or on the subway or on the boardwalk in the shadow of a bridge between two worlds. Please join me with a very warm tribute and celebration of the work and the continued productivity and legacy of Jamel Shabazz.
Good afternoon. Thank you, first of all, to Sarah Lewis for bringing us all together and bringing this vision to fruition. It's my great honor to offer a tribute to Dawoud Bey, who unfortunately can't be here with us, but maybe he's listening, so hi, Dawoud, if you're here. Dawoud Bey, MacArthur Grant recipient, and one of the most important visual chroniclers of Black life working today. In the course of a career spanning more than 40 years, Beigh has visually asserted the value of Black lives. And I take my title from Dawoud's beautiful retrospective catalog that just came out this past year. Beigh's Harlem, USA first announced Dawoud's craft in 1979 when it first showed at the Studio Museum in Harlem. It is a series made over 3 years of mostly street portraits of Harlem style and Harlem smiles, Black faces that often willingly offer themselves up to the camera, returning the photographer's enthusiastic affect. Like famed Harlem portraitist James Van Der Zee before him, Beigh guarantees his subjects affirming images. Harlem, USA is about people and place, people in place. It is a collection that is as much about the dignity of human subjects as it is about the imaging of a Harlem of multiple dimensions. Here, Beigh begins to discover the sweet spot where street photography's bustle meets portraiture's patience, where subjects and place are not only mutually edifying, but mutually constitutive. Harlem, USA, and other series like Street Portraits, Strangers, Community, and more recent, The Character Project, are about his subjects' presence in the present. A call to recognition, these subjects announce, we are here, now, living, loving, inventing. The Birmingham Project, about which I wrote for the Vision and Justice issue of Aperture, combines portraiture, a multi-paneled format, and community collaboration, here 7 years working with Birmingham's Black community, to memorialize one of the most heart-wrenching attacks of the 1960s civil rights movement, the 1963 bombing in Birmingham, Alabama, of the 16th Street Baptist Church by 4 Klansmen, in which 4 Black girls were murdered. Pairing contemporary Birmingham Black youth, the ages of the child victims, with adults, the ages the victims would have been had they lived to adulthood, Beigh's 16 diptychs create a sense of movement and narrative. They move us beyond viewing these subjects as either the embodiment of youthful innocence or as potential victims of racial violence, beyond the before and after of Black martyrdom and photographic memorialization of the dead. Together, the sitters of the Birmingham Project are simultaneously surrogates, mourners, witnesses, community, and agents of their own narratives. It is a profound example of what scholar Christina Sharp calls wake work, an insistence that time does not heal all wounds, a reminder of the persistent precariousness of Black life in the absence of justice. In his Harlem Redux series, Beigh again worked to find a conceptual and formal language, this time to capture the complexity of gentrification. Developed over 3 years, he sought a modality to visualize place, space, memory, and change. In contrast to Harlem, USA's black and white palette, Beigh depicts Harlem's recent development in vivid, almost oversaturated color. In 30 images, Harlem does not open itself up. Rather, it is seen through a series of enclosures, veils, keyholes. The spaces of many frames are divided into grids, partitioned off. Almost all of these partitions are the physical signs of economic growth: construction scaffolding and orange netting, temporary fencing, plywood walls erected around construction zones. Beigh has crafted a photographic language that visualizes economic and racial segregation and dispossession, masquerading as development. Black Harlem, Black people, places, names recede into the background such that whiteness and its capitalist avatars, grids, scaffolding, progress, overtake the landscape. I grew up in Harlem, and the opportunity to write about, that is, think with and think through Dawoud's Harlem Redux series, enabled me to write a love letter to my childhood home, and to be reminded that home for Black folks is never a settled matter. Most recently, Beigh's series, Night Coming Tenderly Black, continues the work of considering the geographies that have structured Black life, that have at once delimited us and sustained us. The series revisits and photographs sites on the Underground Railroad, and attempts to convey a sense of what escape might have looked and felt like as Black folks moved through the darkened landscape, often under cover of night, in pursuit of freedom from slavery. These crepuscular images are also an homage to the great 20th century photographer Roy DeCarava, whose deliberately underexposed prints invited us to recognize the beauty in what we can't see and what we can't know. Though a departure from the portraiture that has largely come to define his career, Dawoud still gives us a language to understand Blackness as a tender embrace. Not just an important chronicler of Black life, Dawoud Bey is one of our finest visual theorists and practitioners of Black life, whose work and practice teach us to see deeply and anew race, history, and the possibility of justice. Thank you.
Now I think you can understand why I feel so grateful to the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study for hosting this event and to all the co-sponsors. This is soul-sustaining work as I see it, nourishing work. And I know that that requires that we also nourish ourselves. So with that, we'll have a 15-minute break and we'll return to resume.